Well, I'm Scott Stornetta, and welcome to this edition of Our American Dreams, a podcast designed to both understand the essence of the American dream and see how it's embodied in some of the people that we respect the most. And I'm grateful to have as our guest Rabbi Eliezar Rubin, head of school for the Joseph Kushner Hebrew Academy. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Stanetta, for this honor to be in discussion with you.
So, as you know, Rabbi Rubin, our discussion is the American dream, or the different versions that we each have of the American dream. But rather than make it a purely philosophical discussion, we're trying to ground it in some very concrete experiences of lives lived and lives being well lived. And so I wonder if I could start off by asking you whether you can think of someone from a previous generation, perhaps an ancestor or a relative, whom you felt had the opportunity to strive for the American dream and what you admire about their life and effort.
It's a really profound question. I just want to introduce it with a brief concept offered by the Talmud, which says that everyone should ask themselves the question, will my actions, my deeds, and my achievements ever match and meet the successes and the achievements of my forefathers? And in a way, it helps all of us in the Jewish community maintain focus on growth, and it keeps us very aspirational as people. In my case, it's very personal. It's not a generic question. Both my grandfather and my father, who were both first generation immigrants, obviously at different generations, made a profound impact on either American life or American Jewish life. My father came here when he was 6, came during the Great Depression. He used to talk about selling bread and meatballs, either by the slice or by the meatball, in the public space, and bring that home to contribute to his parents' sustenance. I'm not sure where he got the bread or the meatball from. As I got older, I realized it's a good thing I never asked, because I probably wouldn't have liked the answer. And he went on to become a really quite influential, impactful community rabbi in the Bronx for over 50 years. But what made his tenure so special and exceptional was that he used his rabbinic position and his charismatic personality and his scholarship to be influence and become part of the Democratic Party in the 1960s and maintain relationships with both Kennedys and Lyndon Johnson. And when they needed emissaries and chaplains to send to Vietnam to come back with a fact-finding report straight from soldiers, my father was asked to participate in this trip and met many of the South Korean generals, the South Vietnamese leaders, and had a direct access to the president and other very historic chaplains in the United States at the time. Afterwards, my father went on to become the chief supervisor of kosher law enforcement in New York State, which is kind of like a kosher police marshal, and then was able to raise the level of kosher enforcement and supervision in New York State for many years. So my father was presented himself as a humble leader, but he had the resolve and the fortitude, and he had the gumption to contribute to the public space in ways that were very significant. And he saw himself, although as an immigrant, as completely integrated into American society, but never lost his strong Jewish identity and voice. And that for me is point number one, that as whatever minority group that we're part of, whatever religion and faith, we should be holding these two together at the same time, not bifurcated or compartmentalized, but integrated in a way that you can be a proud American and contribute to American society, and without compromise, be a steadfast, strong advocate for his people, in this case, the Jewish people. And both aspects of my father's life demonstrated that. My grandfather, who came to the United States earlier, was a brilliant orator, a noted published author, never had a college degree, and was sought after on many occasions to speak and to enlighten people about his book called Pirkei Avot, Ethics from Sinai. But his real historic contribution was that during World War II, in the raging Holocaust, he stopped what he was doing to work together with rabbinic and lay leaders to try to influence the American government to intervene on behalf of saving Jews in Europe. And literally, books have been written about his tireless efforts. And he had made significant contributions to laying the foundation for Jewish life in the United States. So when I say that a person should look at their parents and say, when will my achievements ever reach the goals and the accomplishments of forefathers? I really mean that. But they also serve to me as a strong message and a lesson that we need to have gumption and fortitude and look straight ahead and look at the challenges of the day and find the answer for them.
Well, that's a wonderful response. If I could just comment on two aspects of it. One, the first is that being able to hold simultaneously that American sense and that particular minority or religious or ethnic grouping is, in a sense, part and parcel of the American dream, that it can be a
Exactly.
place where we are free to worship according to the dictates of our own conscience, and that we can identify in ways that are unique and singular to us, but still be very much American. I
And be
guess,
able to create that cross-culturally. The cross-cultural connections between Americans share a very important bond. And that bond that emanates from the Declaration of Independence and the foundations that were put into this country to ensure our freedoms is really what connects us, which also means that we have to fight strong to make sure that we maintain those freedoms that were embedded in the culture of the United States from the early stages and the nascent stages of our growth to make sure that we have those ensured to us for future generations.
yeah, well said. The other of two comments I would make is just that I understand that even in your recounting of these stories about your father and your grandfather, that there's this enormous sense of shoes too big to fill. And yet that's a desirable state for all of us, whether it's our immediate parents and grandparents or something more symbolic of a Father Abraham or something like that, to feel that we're a smaller part of great things that have occurred before, that give us reach for our own aspirations. Can we turn using that point as transition over to your own life and the concept of your own hopes and aspirations, your own version of the American dream that you've both lived and still hope to live? What's the scorecard look like there?
The historic time in which we live doesn't seem to give us kind of the same linear approach to input versus output versus shared values. We're creating community. Assumptions that we all made, at least for my generation growing up, that would continue to foster and that would encourage American cultural growth is now more complex because there are so many different variations and sometimes counter variations on what American life should look like. And somewhere, without getting into the historical political analysis, which is not my space, somewhere in the continuum of American cultural history, we moved away from the responsibility that we have to ourselves and to the community, and instead looked for the responsibility of the community that it has to ourselves. And that the Bill of Rights, which was obviously created with significant freedoms and safety zones for every citizen, in a way carries with it an unintentional and inadvertent message that there is a Bill of Rights that we all have to live in the United States, that there is rights that are coming to us. The only reason why we have rights that are coming to us is because we created a country that could then generate those rights. And that has to be self-sustaining. It groups that feel that we have to just look inward and we have to expect society to change around our views as opposed to contributing to society to make society a wholesome place for others in some degree with even with the best of intentions is eroding the commonality of purpose that exists in this country. I heard a very nice metaphor to that, written by Rabbi Sachs, who was the chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth and then became one of the great scholars and spokespeople for humanity in Judaism during his lifetime. Unfortunately, he died at too young of an age. He explained that the Constitution served as the guiding light and the philosophy with all the flaws that we know existed in the 1700s and the way that it was applied. It was certainly very aspirational. And the Bill of Rights is about the person and the individual. And he said that we have to look at society and culture like one would look at a village or a boarding house. A village is where people share resources and contribute to create a better place for all to live. A boarding house is where everyone lives separately in their own rooms. And living in your own rooms comes with obligations to preserve the sanctity of the space for others, but it carries no obligation. I'd like to go back to the idea that also have a Bill of Rights, which of course protects us, but we should also have a constitution that should guide us in a way that we all contribute to the Commonwealth in any positive way that we can. Now, I know that people who protest and create opposition believe that they are changing the country for the better, but goodness comes from adding goodness. It doesn't come from criticizing and from looking closely at flaws and faults. And a wise comment made by Rabbi Cook was that righteous people don't complain about evil, they add justice. Righteous people don't complain about darkness, they add light. And we should, in some way, try to find that balance between creating a corrective path, but corrective path through positivity. So my aspirations is that we find the place for this country, for minorities, all religious minorities, all faith-based communities, to feel that they are equally as appreciated and recognized as all other groups, but not isolated and not sequestered to the point that they feel that they deserve a certain degree of support and a certain degree of help and guidance that they could rise up and gain what they believe is rightfully theirs. It's a very tough place to be in, but I think we can do that.
You know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but as you were describing the sort of morphing of the Bill of Rights, the phrase that came to my mind was that perhaps people are grateful for the Bill of Rights, but they also feel that there's in parallel a Bill of Entitlement, and that
Right.
perhaps that's the part that is not so healthy for us as a community. Am I too far off the mark
Yes.
for you to
No, I
be?
think I think what I just said in 7 minutes, you summed up in under 1 minute. So I guess either I did a very good job in explaining myself or a very poor job in being succinct.
It was well put, and it was worth the time listening. So in a sense, you've kind of merged two questions that I often ask distinctly. We don't have to follow that script, but one has to do with your efforts to achieve your version of the American dream, and the other has to do with the one thing that you'd like to, help to improve in the society. Is there anything that you feel you haven't spoken to on either of those two separate threads, namely your own experience of trying to live out an American dream and what you see as the opportunity for us to improve the American dream for others? Anything else you'd like to?
I do. There is. I'm fortunate that I chose a life of education as my profession. So there's a way to at least express my views and direct the thinking of my thinking in a way which is more applied and manifest it within the school building. Of course, our job as educators is not to create and to obligate thinking, but to inspire thinking. Our way is not to control the minds, but inspire the minds. And it's always a challenge. But I think that especially now in the last few years, what I've taken on for myself and differently, I think if you would have asked me 5 years ago, is that the more there's noise and seems to have a sense of voicelessness in society, either because of the vastness of the internet or the crushing cacophony sounds of the very angry protests. I think it pushes
Would that be
aside.
the crushing and callous cacophony to be
That's a good.
a
I
true
needed.
Rubinism?
I needed a third. You're right there. I only got two. I think there's a natural tendency to feel that there's no space for strong or good or virtuous voices to contribute and to try to add their voices to a space which is being taken over or that's being overwhelmed by those who are screaming louder. And what I'd like to, if I can, as an aspiration,
Please.
is to inspire our students to say that everyone should find a place in the public sphere. And that doesn't necessarily have to be running for office. It certainly means to get out simply is to vote. It means if there's some initiative that's taking place in a community to join it. If there's a public fundraiser and it includes even a physical expression of contribution, they should be part of it. But it also means saying thank you to the person who packs their bags in grocery store, or taking the grocery wagon at ShopRite and not leaving it in the parking lot, but rolling it back into that little shopping wagon tent that's made. So the person who is working at minimum wage doesn't have to go bring my shopping wagon in the middle of the rain back to the covered canopy because I did my part. So sure, it would be nice if everybody would be able to change the world from the top of a mountain and kind of speak in orate and inspiring words. That's not what we're called to do. We're called to be good, positive citizens, and it becomes contagious. Because if taking the shopping wagon example, if you roll your shopping wagon back to that little tent in the middle of the rain on a cold, windy day, and someone who sees it, maybe it would inspire somebody else to do it. And even if it doesn't, you know that you contributed to somebody's life today. So, from the smallest, minute, imperceptible acts of society to the larger involvement and even finding a place within the public space, there's so much that I think we can inspire students to understand their space and their place. And that's what my aspiration is personally. And I try as best as I can to live by my own words. Sometimes it gets a little hard to live up to my own expectations. But listen, we all fall and fail and falter, and then we have to pick ourselves up and start over again.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I will be looking for you at the ShopRite Livingston because I know they've got the kosher aisle there, but I'll be checking you out in in the parking lot whenever I have opportunity. You know, you talk about giving a voice for, and again, I'm slightly putting words in your mouth, the honest and the wise, as opposed to those that speak with the largest volume. This, in fact, this podcast forum is a deliberate attempt to achieve that. And I understand that claiming yourself to be a member of the 36 is an automatic disqualification, but in some sense, we're trying in our own feeble way to constitute that group of the honest and the wise. And so now we get to in a sense, the most presumptive aspect of this conversation, which is for you to reflect on those that you have known personally in your life that you admire as honest and wise, and potentially to give them an opportunity to join this forum. Is there someone that you've given thought to that you think has a voice that truly needs to be heard as a reflection not of their stridency or their florid language, but because of the basic goodness of their life?
I do. And it's somebody who I look up to and admire, even though we don't share views that would be congruent or supportive in the political space. And it's because of that that I admire him even more. And he is he's an attorney, a partner in a law firm. His name is Stephen Coppell and Sigley. And he has consistently over the decades used his has made value judgments and has supported causes using his legal expertise and his position as an attorney to help those in need, to speak up for those whose voices are not as loud, and to be extremely community minded in the way that he lives his life, and all through an extremely ethical lens that could be relied on for in any difficult, complex, convoluted situation. I have found myself calling him when faced with dilemmas or conundrums, and I've always admired his wisdom and his ability to see the truth, even while maintaining a position that was unpopular. At the same time, what I really admire is that he listens to others. And having your version of the truth in a relativism world is certainly something that could lead to kind of a cultural devolving state. But having a version of truth in your own mind and listen to others, that definitely protects us against this relativism and modernism of our society, where all truths have to be held as religious beliefs.
Well, again, a wonderful statement. And are you going to identify this person by name offline or?
I mentioned it briefly a moment ago. I'm happy
I
to do
heard
it
the law
offline.
firm.
His name is Stephen Coppell,
Okay.
Koppel.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. Rabbi Rubin, it's been a pleasure to have this brief time together. It's in a sense, for me personally, summative of the 6 years that we've known each other. You're obviously one of the people that I think of when I think of the honest and wise, simply by virtue of you. That's why you're in this podcast, and I just want to thank you publicly for that.
Yes,
Any final comment you'd like to make?
it's been an absolute privilege in my life to, even for the short period, to count you as someone in my circle that I could look to, admire, aspire to be like, and know that I'm in the presence of a great man. And when you're in the presence of a great man, Dr. Snyder, like you, I'm better off for it. So thank you for being who you are, and thank you for your friendship. And I appreciate the honor for even being considered for this podcast, although I think you way overstated my attributes. But you know what? Sometimes lying for a good cause is a good thing.
All right. I'm Scott Stornetta, and this has been another episode of Our American Dreams.
Thank you.